Welcome to the first of many lecture videos regarding non-intentional childhood injuries. We're going to focus about morbidity and mortality, the statistics, injury risks and what we can do to prevent it, as well as the variety of injuries that children will come in with and what we need to do. When you look at the picture here on the right side, what do you notice? What you should notice is, number one, they're at a busy street corner. Number two, they have no helmets on. Number three, they have no elbow pads or knee pads. And so that's why I say this is an injury waiting to happen. I happened to be driving by and saw these kids coming down an alley. And it was a blind alley. If a car would have turned into them, they would have been hit head on. So I stopped when they finally got to the stoplight and snapped a photo of them. So this brings us to our next slide, which tells us about the 10 leading causes of death by age group. And this goes all the way through our lifespan. But when you look at the number one cause of death in our children, it's due to unintentional injuries. And then when you look down and you see those red blocks, that's homicide. And the green ones are suicide. And look at suicide, third leading cause of death in kids aged 10 to 14. So now we're going to break it down even further and seeing what type of injuries causes the death. So for our young children less than 1 year of age, unintentional suffocation. And so this can be from SIDS by themselves, rolling over onto a pillow, rolling onto mom or dad when they're sleeping. That's what the unintended suffocation is. And then it's the fourth one down is motor vehicle traffic accidents. When we get to our 1 to 4-year-olds, motor vehicle accidents goes up to number 2, and then our older children, it is number 1. Unintentional motor vehicle traffic accident. So it's either they are in the car and there is an accident, or it's what we call a pedestrian versus auto, which is very common. So I request that you all put your cell phones away when you are driving, especially in a school zone. Slow down. When we are in a hurry, when we're on our phones, we're not paying attention. These kids are little and we hit them, and it's not good. The other thing that's interesting on this slide, in my opinion, is all of this unintentional drowning. So our 1 to 4-year-olds, that's their number one cause of death. Our 5 to 9-year-olds, they're still dying. Our 14-year-olds, it's their fifth leading cause of death. But that's after we look at suicide, suicide by firearm, and homicide. When we look at our 1 to 4-year-olds, we have our drowning, motor vehicle traffic accidents. They also can suffocate. And then they have fire and burns, unintentional pedestrian injury, homicide. So the next two slides basically talk about the different kinds of injuries. So they fall, they hurt themselves. They have drowning and near drowning. We have burns. They get into poisons and they end up with sometimes short-lived problems and other times lifelong problems. Motor vehicle accidents where they are not restrained properly. Beginning in 2017, I believe the law is changing that they have to stay rear-facing in the back seat until they're 4 years of age or 40 pounds. Then we have our trauma, and trauma is in the form of auto versus pedestrian, skateboards, gunshot wounds, and stabbing. And we're talking children, we're not talking adults. And then we have our deaths of homicide, suicide, drowning, and motor vehicle accidents. Why do they get injured? Because they're kids. They have a lot of energy, they have a lot of different toys to play with, and we have climbing injuries. Pedestrian traffic safety. Hopefully your mother and father taught you all to look both ways before you go into the street. However, when the ball goes out into the street and kids are playing, they're not listening to what their parents said. They dart out between two cars to get their ball, and nobody can see them, and they get hit. We have children who use dangerous machinery. A lawnmower is very dangerous. It spits things out from underneath that can be projectiles and hit a small child with sticks and stones and whatever else it's spitting out. Plus, on the bottom of that is our blades. They also are dealing with gasoline. We have some children who are what we call latchkey kids. Some of you may have grown up this way. Mom and dad were both working. They didn't have a babysitter. They told you where the key was. They go into the house and they can do whatever happens. I know my own children. Their father was asleep. They were outside in the garage with the neighbors, lighting candles. And then they got some of his cigarettes and they decided to turn on the stove and light the cigarettes, and they were out smoking in the garage. And I think the oldest one was 10. I think they were roasting marshmallows with the candles. Yeah, that's what they were doing. And then we have injuries. They are running around with sticks and stones, and this little guy was running with a fork. And guess what happened? He tripped and fell, and the fork went straight up his nose. And when you look at where that fork is on his face, this is a real kid. He was so lucky that he didn't poke that right into his eye. And what ended up happening is all they needed to do was pull that out, and there's no permanent damage. You can see children run, they laugh, they play, they don't pay attention to the rules, they're out having a good time. So they are really at a high risk for injuring themselves. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about some of the other things and what you need to do, first of all, for assessing a child who comes in with an unintentional injury.